Hey, Senator Rubio.
Yes, sir. Good morning.
I was talking yesterday to my pastor. We go to a pretty large church here, predominantly African American. He said to me on the phone yesterday, I'm having my doubts about the Republican Party because it just seems like they really don't want people that look like me in the party. I believe in you. I really do. You're my number one. This is my 9-year-old right here. She knows Marco Rubio, Marco Rubio. Our front runner is a nationalist. He's a divider. The second guy, I don't like the fact that he tells tales on you, but his stated campaign is, I'm going to broaden the quote-unquote evangelical base that didn't come out the last time. My question is, what will you do? Because specifically, African Americans aren't going to vote the Republican Party. We know that. But 3 to 5% difference makes a big difference when it comes to November. I believe you can do that. But tell me how specifically you're going to do that so that I can go back and tell my friends that they need to listen to you.
Yes, sir. Well, first of all, given the modern society, we always come up with labels for people. So you would be described as an African American. I would be described as a Hispanic American. I want to begin to focus on the American part of it because we're Americans. We're Americans. That's what we are. And we face many of the same challenges. In fact, all of the same ones. When they raise taxes, they don't have an African American tax or a Hispanic American tax. They have a tax, and everyone has to pay the higher tax. When the economy isn't doing well, everyone pays the price. And so that's important. And so we need to get back to that notion, the truth. And that is that we are all truly in this together. There is no policies here that exempt people because of their political beliefs or their political registration. If there's something that's bad for America, it's bad for all Americans, no matter how you registered to vote or who you voted for in the past. Now, that does not mean we ignore that there are communities in this country that face specific and unique challenges that need to be addressed. And let me just say, the fact that your pastor feels that way and the fact that there are people in this country from minority communities who feel as if they are being treated differently or left behind by the American dream, that alone is an issue. If you have a significant percentage of the American family that feels as if they are being treated differently or left behind, that is an issue and we need to confront it. Now, I've been dealing with this issue for a long time because I happen to have grown up my majority of my life attending majority minority schools, both in high school and before that. And so to me, these are not theoretical issues. I've seen it. And I recognize, first of all, the deep historical realities that are in place, but also modern day challenges. I'll give you a true story. Okay. First of all, let me begin by saying this. I believe the overwhelming majority of people who serve in law enforcement are incredible human beings who are willing to risk their lives for our safety and security, and we thank them. We thank them. But my kids, my sons, have almost always played in majority-minority sports teams. And one of their coaches is a police officer and is an African-American male in his early 30s. And over the last 4 years, he's been pulled over 7 or 8 times. And he's never been given a ticket. He's a police officer. Sometimes when they pull him over, they recognize him, and they're like, oh, and they have no reason. They have no rationale for why they pulled him over. So what is he supposed to think? How's he supposed to feel? You tell me how someone's supposed to feel when you get pulled over 8 times and over a number of years, you never get a ticket, and no one has any explanation for why you got pulled over. I can tell you how I would feel. So we can't ignore that he feels that way. And he's a police officer. It's his department. So it upsets him. It upsets him. And it upsets him that his sons and his kids are going to grow up in the same. We have to talk about that. Now, I don't know if the president can fix it, but we better acknowledge that it's true. We also have to acknowledge challenges that you find in minority communities. You see it in the Hispanic community. You see it in the African American community. Here's the fact. If you are born into a dangerous neighborhood, living in substandard housing, you're being raised by your grandmother because your dad has never been around and your mom is either working 2 jobs or moved in with her boyfriend, being raised by a grandmother who's also raising 3 or 4 other kids from her, through her other 4 other grandchildren. The school you're forced to attend by the government is failing, and you, because you don't have money, you can't choose a better setting. Those kids have 5 strikes against them. Statistics will tell you a kid that's facing 5 strikes against them at 2 and 3 years of age is going to struggle to succeed unless something happens to break that cycle. And there are examples of things that help break the cycle, and they have a little bit to do with government, but it has a lot to do with the community around it. So back in 2007, 2006, I visited a program in New York City called the Harlem's Children's Zone. The Harlem's Children's Zone is an area in Harlem. It's just a square block area. And what an incredible leader named Jeffrey Canada, who grew up in that neighborhood, said is, no kid in this geographic area of a few square blocks is going to fail. We are going to leverage everything, the private sector, the government sector, the public sector, the community, the churches, and we are going to ensure that we break the cycle. We're not waiting for the government to come down here and create a program. We're going to do it. We are going to deal with all of these challenges. These kids don't have access to Wi-Fi. We're going to make sure that we deal with this issue. These kids are raising kids. We're going to have parent academies, not through government, that teach people how to raise kids. When you're 17 years old and you have a baby, someone needs to teach you about, what it takes to do these sorts of things. In essence, they dealt with all the underlying conditions. The results have been extraordinary. You have kids surrounded in a community where people are failing that are succeeding. So when I became Speaker of the Florida House, we took that model and brought it to Liberty City in Miami and opened up something called the Miami Children's Zone. Today it's been expanded to Jacksonville and to Orlando. And it had a rough start, but it's working. In essence, we are dealing with the underlying causes. You have public housing where they take one of the units, and you know what they turned it into? A computer lab. Because these kids have to do homework at night, but they have no access to Wi-Fi. That's how you end up going to McDonald's and seeing a mom with her kids in the car on the laptop using the free Wi-Fi at McDonald's. That's a real impediment. That's why I believe in school choice. We have a school choice program in Florida where the overwhelming majority of students who use it are minority students, whose parents for the first time in generations have been able to put their kids in a faith-based school, but in a school of their choice. Because the only people in America who do not have school choice are poor people. Rich people have school choice. The upper middle class has school choice. Middle class, or whatever you want to call it, people move to better neighborhoods with better schools. But if you're poor, you're stuck. So that's why I support school choice. We have to break that cycle. That unfortunate, it's not just a minority phenomenon. You see it in other communities as well. But I think that's a point, one of the things that we need to address and care about. Absolutely. We have to remove any impediments that exist in the lives of our people in getting access to the American dream. But I would just say ultimately, I honestly deeply believe this. We cannot fulfill our destiny if a significant percentage of our population feels as if it's being left behind. And the challenges are deeper than that, by the way. Imagine for a moment, you are a 17-year-old teenager, 18 years now. You're 18 years old and you do something really, really dumb. You commit a crime, not a violent crime, but you steal something from a department store, they catch you. And they're going to lay it down on you because they're tough on crime. And we all want to be tough on crime. So now you're 18 years of age. You spend days in jail, surrounded by hardened criminals. Then you're released. They assign you a public defender who has 5,000 other cases. So this public defender convinces you to plead guilty, and you do. Now you've got a criminal record. No one ever told you that. You have a criminal record for the rest of your life. You may even have to serve some time in jail, surrounded by other dangerous criminals. When you serve time in jail, the chances of you becoming a permanent criminal spike because you've just spent time basically in a criminal college where you are surrounded by other people that are, and then you leave and you have a stigma associated with you. And my point is, what if we could handle that a little differently? What if in this country we say, look, if you're 18 years old, you've never done anything wrong before, it's your first time ever, and it's not a violent crime or anything serious, why don't we try to divert them out of the system? Why don't we try to put a little bit of a scare in them, but more importantly to say, hey, divert them out of the court system so they don't have a record. If they have a record, they can't join the military. If they have a record, they're not going to get hired because who's going to take a chance? And as opposed to having someone stigmatized. I told the story before. My kids aren't here, so I'll tell it again. I was 18 years old. My friends and I went to a park to drink beer after hours. I'm against drinking beer at 18 years of age. Strongly against it. But I did something stupid, and the neighbors called the cops, and the cops showed up. And those cops could have been hard on us. They could have cuffed us and taken us in and mug shots. And now, they gave us a ticket, promise to appear. And then thank God, the state attorney there just dismissed it. They could have handled it very differently. And who knows what would have happened if they had handled it differently. But I can tell you I would have had to explain to the Florida bar. I would have had to explain to every one of my employers. I'm just saying, if we can avoid that situation early on, I think you're also going to help divert a lot of people. And again, this is a real issue in many minority communities in this country. So I do think we have to have someone at the presidency who understands and cares about these things. But for me, these issues aren't about winning the election. I'm going to do that whether minority communities vote for me or not. In essence, I'm going to be a president that loves the American people, even the people that don't love me back. I have to be president of every American, and I will look out for their best interest, because ultimately the country I want my children to inherit is a country where no one feels the way your pastor feels right now. And we're going to change that. We're going to work every day to change that, because we can't fulfill our destiny if we don't.